Hi, everyone, and welcome to week 3 of the class, and we're going to be looking at media effects. So media effects is an outgrowth of propaganda theory and mass society theory, and it was through these theories and through the research that led to the theories that researchers trying to understand how media really affected people. Did it have the direct impact, or was it more complex than that? So let's consider how media affects people. Have you ever shared a piece of media with someone and tried to convince them of something or tried to change their mind? If so, media effects theory may already be at work with others and in our daily interactions. Do we think that it's simply that media have explanatory purpose and authoritative power, or perhaps we believe that they have the ability to influence the thinking of others, that people will be influenced by the media message as well as our endorsement of it? Well, mass society and propaganda theory were debunked years ago, but what could be behind the influences of media and society? Media effects theory was the next step in trying to figure this out theoretically and empirically. The media effects trend posited that media has an impact on individuals, but it's unclear how much and to what degree. Answering those questions should be the goal of research and theory development. Questions being, how much does it impact individuals and to what degree? So these are the questions that our researchers are trying to figure out. What's more, that research should adhere to the scientific methodology or empirical or quantitative research that closely replicates the methods used by researchers in the quote-unquote hard or natural sciences. This is post-positivist theory, as we discussed in week 1, and the epistemology is such that it's believed that knowledge must be observed through a controlled lens and experience. So experiments must be able to be replicated and controlled so that we can narrow down to a single variable. And through these experiments, the data is gathered. So this turn is all part of a 20th century turn toward quantitative and empirical data. These research methods were considered to be highly successful between World War I and World War II, and it made government and private funders take note of the advances that were being made. Funders believed that these methods should be applied to all types of research, and as such, they gave preference to post-positivist methodologists such as Lazarsfeld and Hovland. Functionalism is another important theory that developed during this period. Researchers who supported functionalism envisioned every part of society having a function, and media and mass communication had functions within our larger society, though not necessarily the power that was conceived of in mass society and propaganda theory. In terms of media effects theory and the post-positivist approach, Paul Lazarsfeld and Carl Hovland were pioneers in this research and believed that effects could and should be observed and would lead to theory grounded in observation, much like researchers in other sciences were doing. Lazarsfeld's research in particular garnered significant funding that bolstered this approach, even though the data continued to indicate that media effects could not be so strongly or quickly observed. These researchers also gained support from corporations who were eager to collect research about the effects of advertisements, TV, and other media on consumers. Lazarsfeld coined this type of research as administrative research. CBS and NBC eventually created internal research teams and worked with large external consultants. Because these agencies had large budgets, they could continue to fund research despite the fact that it was inconclusive. This research led to the development of many survey tools that are still in wide use today, such as the Gallup polls and Nielsen. Fear of the power of propaganda in World War I and the onset of World War II led to research about the impact of media messages on soldiers. In time, Hovland determined that media messages alone would not change attitudes and beliefs. This research began to debunk propaganda theory and brought to light the many humanistic variables that influence media's effect on individuals. Time, experience, prior beliefs, politics, social status, and education were among the variables that affected how media did or did not impact beliefs and attitude change. Lazarsfeld also found that individuals tend to seek out and filter for information that reinforces their established beliefs and systems. Individuals avoid cognitive dissonance or grappling with information that contradicts their beliefs, so they select, pay attention to, and retain information that confirms their biases and beliefs. Allport and Postman's experiment, exposing individuals to an image of a white man with a knife and an empty-handed black man, revealed the majority of participants believed the black man held the knife. Braun and Davis bring this up near the end of the chapter in considering incarceration rates in the U.S., car searches, and other data that indicate that black men and people of color are suspected of crime and charged with crime more frequently than whites, despite data that shows a greater percentage of white teens have drug use problems. That's one example of an area where we know that we have information that indicates white teens have a more significant problem, and yet black teens are accused of that problem and arrested for carrying drugs more frequently. So this is all to say this is supported by this, it supports this theory and notion that people look for data, information, media that reinforces their current beliefs. So media effects research also led to a proliferation of surveys, focus groups, interviews, and audience perception methods that are still cornerstones of the advertising world. Information flow theory or source-dominated theory came from a perspective that the masses needed to be well-informed to achieve an ideal democratic society. From these theoretical perspectives, information should flow directly from powerful elites to less educated or less informed average people. The theory explained what could be observed about the flow of media, but it missed the mark in explaining how attitudes and beliefs change. This theory, the hypodermic needle theory, isn't mentioned in the book, but it captures the sense that the media produce a message and the audience internalizes or takes on that message and belief. But we know that Lazarsfeld's voting study, for example, debunked propaganda theory and theories like the hypodermic needle theory, as few participants changed their vote as a result of media exposure through the experiment. Lazarsfeld went on to define two-step flow theory, which describes influencers or gatekeepers who pass along and amplify messages. These opinion leaders were well-liked, gregarious, and influential, and tended to share information within their social circles, but were not influential to those in other circles or social standings. So Lazarsfeld understood that there had to be some impact because some people were being influenced by media messaging. So he went deeper and tried to understand where the connection was. And this is the theory that he developed. So what we're seeing is sort of this tension between the direct impact, the arrows to the right, this message is sent, people get it directly, versus on the left, communication being this more convoluted or circuitous experience. So the final bodies of theory in this chapter are functional and systems theories that examine mass media at a macro level. They examine where media fits into society, how it is produced, and address the questions: who says what to whom, through what medium, and with what effect. So these theories are really trying to understand what is happening, but there's not such a focus on the value judgment, but just to understand how media is moving and being exchanged and how communication occurs. These theories are known for being value neutral and for generally reinforcing the status quo. They're rarely definitive about the dysfunction or function of media as good or bad, but rather document how individuals interact with media. For example, people tend to continue to consume media that reinforce what they believe, like, and accept in the world, and overexposure to certain news can cause people to disregard or ignore it altogether. This is known as the narcotizing effect. Media was also identified as having an entertainment function in society that was regarded as neither good or bad, but perhaps better that people were spending time on TV, watching, being entertained or relaxing than on other addictions or poor pastimes. In general, both media effects, functionalism, and systems theories were too simplistic to capture the nature of human decision making and relationships. These theories that developed during an era before TVs were in homes and through the early adoption of home televisions raise many interesting questions for our own time. How do we select media, and how do our opinions change? Do we rely on influencers, or are we influencers? Consider the influencer culture and phenomena of YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram in particular. Do media generally reinforce our pre-existing beliefs? Finally, given clear, mediated information in the form of text or images, do we change our beliefs or interpretations, or do we default to our pre-existing notions? So I hope that this presentation, this little mini lecture, helps kind of focus the reading. It's a bit dense this week, and this is just meant to give you some highlights and help you on your way through the assignments. So hopefully you're off to a great start and have a wonderful week.